Not so, Mr. Edgar. He grew pale with pure annoyance, a feeling that reached its climax when his lady rose and, stepping across the rug, seized Heathcliff's hands again and laughed like one beside herself. I shall think it a dream tomorrow, she cried. I shall not be able to believe that I have seen and touched and spoken to you once more. And yet, cruel Heathcliff, you don't deserve this welcome. To be absent and silent for 3 years, and never to think of me. A little more than you have thought of me, he murmured. I heard of your marriage, Kathy, not long since, and while waiting in the yard below, I meditated this plan. Just to have one glimpse of your face, a stare of surprise, perhaps, and pretended pleasure, afterwards settle my score with Hindley, and then prevent the law by doing execution on myself. Your welcome has put these ideas out of my mind, but beware of meeting me with another aspect next time. Nay, you'll not drive me off again. You were really sorry for me, were you? Well, there was cause. I've fought through a bitter life since I last heard your voice, and you must forgive me, for I struggled only for you. Catherine, unless we are to have cold tea, please to come to the table, interrupted Linton, striving to preserve his ordinary tone and a due measure of politeness. Mr. Heathcliff will have a long walk, wherever he may lodge tonight, and I'm thirsty. She took her post before the urn, and Miss Isabella came, summoned by the bell. Then, having handed their chairs forward, I left the room. The meal hardly endured 10 minutes. Catherine's cup was never filled. She could neither eat nor drink. Edgar had made a slop in his saucer, and scarcely swallowed a mouthful. Their guest did not protract his stay that evening above an hour longer. I asked as he departed if he went to Gimmerton. No, to Wuthering Heights, he answered. Mr. Earnshaw invited me when I called this morning. Mr. Earnshaw invited him, and he called on Mr. Earnshaw? I pondered the sentence painfully after he was gone. Is he turning out a bit of a hypocrite and coming into the country to work mischief under a cloak? I mused. I had a presentiment in the bottom of my heart. I had a presentiment in the bottom of my heart that he had better have remained away. About the middle of the night, I was wakened from my first nap by Mrs. Linton gliding into my chamber, taking a seat on my bedside, and pulling me by the hair to rouse me. I cannot rest, Helen, she said by way of an apology, and I want some living creature to keep me company in my happiness. Edgar is sulky because I'm glad of a thing that does not interest him. He refuses to open his mouth, except to utter pettish, silly speeches, and he affirmed I was cruel and selfish for wishing to talk when he was so sick and sleepy. He always contrives to be sick at the least cross. I gave a few sentences of commendation to Heathcliff, and he, either for headache or a pang of envy, began to cry. So I got up and left him. What use is it praising Heathcliff to him? I answered. As lads, they had an aversion to each other, and Heathcliff would hate just as much to hear him praised. It's human nature. Let Mr. Linton alone about him, unless you would like an open quarrel between them. But does it not show great weakness? Pursued she. I'm not envious. I never feel hurt at the brightness of Isabella's yellow hair, and the whiteness of her skin, at her dainty elegance, and the fondness of all the family exhibit for her. Even you, Nellie, if we had a dispute sometime, you back Isabella at once, and I yield like a foolish mother. I call her a darling, and flatter her into a good temper. It pleases her brother to see us cordial, and that pleases me. But they are very much alike. They are spoiled children, and fancy the world was made for their accommodation. And though I humor both, I think a smart chastisement might improve them all the same. You're mistaken, Mrs. Linton, said I. They humor you. I know what they would be to do if they did not. I know what there would be to do if they did not. You can well afford to indulge their passing whims as long as their business is to anticipate all your desires. You may, however, fall out at last over something of equal consequence to both sides, and then those you term weak are very capable of being as obstinate as you. And then we shall fight to the death, shan't we, Nellie? She returned, laughing. No, I tell you, I have such faith in Linton's love that I believe I might kill him, and he wouldn't wish to retaliate. I advised her to value him the more for his affection. I do, she answered, but he needn't resort to whining for trifles. It is childish. And instead of melting into tears because I said that Heathcliff was now worthy of anyone's regard, and it would honor the first gentleman in the country to be his friend, he ought to have said it to me, and been delighted from sympathy. He must get accustomed to him, and he may as well like him, considering how Heathcliff has reason to object to him. I'm sure he behaved excellently.